Welcome to Real Rockford Files, for tales of the paranormal, supernatural, and the flat-out unbelievable. Today will be a continuance of my previous episode, aliens, UFOs, and time-slip stories. Let's get into it. Story 1. About 5 or 6 years ago, my boyfriend and I were hanging out with two acquaintances. One had several experiences with greys and other unexplainable stuff. I'll refer to him as E. The other guy was curious but haven't had any. My boyfriend had experiences too, one from which he shared with E. As for myself, I've heard stories, not just from them growing up. So this particular night, it's probably around 12:30 a.m., we were out driving around Pasadena, California, and my boyfriend mentions going to a place nearby that he and E knew about. E hesitates but agrees because he knew it was on private property. We park and have to walk up a really dark, curvy driveway, which is not even close to being safe because it's dirt and very narrow, and it goes up a hillside. If you drive up carelessly, you can literally roll your car down the ravine. Anyway, we make it to the top of the hill. Our intentions was just to find a place to sit and wait for something to happen. This particular area is known for a few people for occurrences. There is a house on the bluff overlooking the city. Behind the house, it drops onto a field. We didn't want to disturb anyone, so we walked down along a path that runs along the field out of sight of the house, and walked to the other side of the field and up some stairs. We are now on the opposite side of the house. There is a pool area that has a tall wooden fence around it. The gate is unlocked, so we go in. The pool is empty and there is junk all over. Clearly it hasn't been used in years, so we find some old chairs and sit and wait. This side looks over onto the forest, but if you go to the far left, you can see city lights in the distance. Looking across the forest is where we start to see a strange light coming out just above the tree line. It slowly moved back and forth, going down into the trees and coming up again. As this was happening, the light would change color. It went from a bright white to blue, then it would change to a dim red color. It just continued to do this. It was so weird. We sat for a little longer, and I remembered getting a feeling like we were being watched. Of course, I was a little paranoid because we were in a place that we shouldn't have been in the first place. There was a massive tree that sat on the bluff, like 50 feet from the house, at the far end of the pool. It caught my eye because it did the oddest thing, almost like something flew into the tree. It's kind of hard to explain, like it was alive. I don't know, just the way it was swaying, it was almost like a dance. I've never seen a large tree move like that, almost like it had intention. I know I saw it, but I didn't talk at all. None of us did. We just sat in silence and continued to observe our surroundings. I just couldn't stop looking at that tree. It was a calm night. The sky was clear, no sign of any storm. Nothing else was being blown around. It was just that tree that kept me intrigued. Well, after a while, we decided it was time to leave. The light in the distance stopped appearing. We walked in silence all the way back to the car. That's when we started talking about what we saw. Then E says, "So how about that tree?" We all saw it but didn't have any explanation for anything that night. I would like to go back there again, but I don't think it's a good idea. Story 2. I have two encounters. The first one happened roughly 10 years ago. My father, my two brothers, and me were on our back porch in Georgia. We lived in the country and literally had no neighbors for 2 miles in any direction. So we were out there. We were looking at the stars on a clear night, and we noticed a very bright star. After looking at it for a few minutes, it shot across the sky, stopped, shot straight up, stopped, then shot right again and stopped, and then went up diagonally and disappeared. Every time it shot across the sky, it was moving a good 5 to 6 inches, so in the sky it was moving easily hundreds of miles. I don't know if it was aliens or the government testing something, but it was amazing. The second encounter was my father, brother, and me driving down the road near our house. This happened 5 years ago. It was nighttime, and again we live in the middle of nowhere on backcountry roads. We saw in the mirrors, and by looking, a red rectangular light heading down the road from behind us, heading our way. It was going slightly faster than us. It passed overhead and was completely silent. We obviously stopped at this point, and it continues on down the road. Once the road ended, it went above the tree line and literally shot away at a high rate of speed in the sky. We never saw it again and could not make out what was causing the light. It was just a rectangular looking light coming from it. It was also much larger than the car, approximately the size of two school buses if they were welded together side by side. Any comments, please, would be greatly appreciated. Story 3. This happened a few months ago. So I work as a nurse and started a new job 45 minutes away at a nursing home that pays well and has the shift that I want. The shift I normally work is weekend doubles, evening and overnights, a 16-hour shift a day. But they needed me to work morning and evening this particular weekend, so I agreed, switching my sleeping schedule. The night shift nurse who came to relieve me was late Sunday night. I was behind on charting anyway, so I didn't get upset. I was given a report and heard a yelling resident on the floor. He said he fell. He was wearing warm socks that are not non-slip, sent to the ER due to his hip. More charting, state reportable if broken. Get out of work at 1 to 2 a.m., close to a 20-hour shift after a 17-hour shift the day before. I was dead on my feet, but I felt well enough to drive. My car is very tiny, I can't sleep in it, and my friend wouldn't answer the phone. The way I go home has a lot of twists and turns. I travel by the lake and love the water, so it helps me stay awake. I realize around here that I am not wearing my glasses, but I am too lazy to turn around to go get them. I only wear them to work and drive, but take them off to chart. I forget them a lot. I go past a small town, twists, turns, and woods, listen to my book to keep awake, about halfway home. At the next turn, there is a bright light, like a spotlight, coming through the woods. I continue on a little bit further, still in the wooded area and towards where the bright light is coming from. Bend in the road once more. On the side of the road where the night before I saw a hit deer was what looked to be a very thin man, skin-tight black clothes, kneeling over the deer that is still there, his back towards me. I thought he looked weird, but my glasses were gone, and my eyes are starting to blur a little. The spotlight was coming from the woods, pointing towards the man. I remember thinking about the light, thinking about how they got their vehicle through the woods, but again, I was dead. I try to pause my book, and my car slows down and nearly stopped. The man starts to move from the deer. I roll down my window and ask, "Is everything okay? Need any help?" Not really looking at him. I thought that maybe it was a different deer he'd hit. I'm about 15 to 20 or so feet in front of him. My car is stopped at this point. I'm still trying to get my book to stop. My touchscreen radio isn't working well, so I pick up my phone and stop my book. I really look towards the man after looking away from my phone, finally getting my book to stop, and realize that he or she really isn't a human. I freeze. It has stood up and faced me. The head is huge, like they describe aliens to be with huge eyes, except it is tall, not a tiny thing like they show on TV. It starts to walk towards my car. I can't breathe. I can't move. I felt like I couldn't even think. Everything just felt like it froze. I heard a voice, not mine, that sounded like it was just in my head say, "Sleep." I blink. It is gone along with the deer. I look at my clock, almost 4 a.m. My car is in park now, and I'm pulled over with no memory of doing so. My window is still down. I look at my phone, which is still in my hand, open it, and my book is still stopped in the same place. I try to call my sister, but she wouldn't answer, so I call my job. They answer. I just ask about my glasses and the resident. I eventually tell her I fell asleep and wanted to talk to someone so it doesn't happen again and everyone is asleep. They stayed on the phone until I got home. I don't think I fell asleep, but I pretend I did so I don't go insane. I haven't told anyone this. It scares me just thinking about it. If I did fall asleep, I could have hurt someone. If I didn't, then... Story 4. I had experiences for many years, from about 7, maybe even younger, to about 13 on a regular basis. The last very big experience was when I was about 20 or 21. I'm 35 now. The very last time something came right in my face and showed itself, and I told it I wasn't scared anymore, and it went away. Almost every night something would lift me out of bed. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm not lying, and it's true. I could hear my mom talking to things going on in the house, the creaks of the steps down the hall, but never once did anyone walk in when this was happening. I always thought if someone saw, they would think something was wrong with me. I was a kid at the time. I never saw a face. I would just say, put me down, over and over. I swear I remember touching the actual ceiling. It was not sleeping at all. When I did sleep, I could never sleep on my back, even to this day, because I would have extremely crazy nightmares. I had visions that were like something from a movie of what will happen in the future, like needing an ID to scan an entry to Walmart, for example, how batshit crazy our world looks years from now. Since I was about 7, I could remember this over and over. So I have seen many things I could share. Story 5. This happened to me back in 2013. I was 18 at the time. I was a healthy, normal woman by all accounts, and lived in a suburb of South Florida. Just at that juncture in my life, I was moving up north to UF, which is in Gainesville. Aside from the university, it's a very boring town. Mostly nothing up there. I had noticed that before moving there and during my time there, once a month, always on the same night, I think the first Sunday of every month, I wouldn't be able to sleep. Without fail, I couldn't sleep, and I would toss and turn all night. Sometimes after those nights, I would wake up with something strange on my body. Once, on my lower spine, right on the cord, I awoke with a large red bump, perfectly centered. It wasn't itchy like a bug bite, and it was unlike a pimple. Another time, I awoke with a scar across my lower abdomen. It was long, and unlike a scratch, it was brown, like a cauterized scar, but it was left my body within a day or two like a scratch might have. On one such Sunday, my boyfriend happened to be spending the night. It was my parents' rule that he would sleep in a separate room, but before he went off to his room, he laid next to me in my bed for a little while and we talked. He was saying something when suddenly he went quiet and looked behind him. I asked what was the matter, but he shrugged it off. He went to his room and we both tried to sleep. However, like usual on these nights, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep, a feeling of dread preventing me from sleeping. I got restless and decided to go sleep in the room with my boyfriend, hoping I might be able to relax with him there. But still I couldn't sleep, nearly dozing off only to awake in a fright, which was so uncharacteristic. I gave up and I went back to my own room until I suddenly gave in and fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, I told my boyfriend that I couldn't sleep all night. I felt like something was coming to get me. He told me at that moment the previous night, when he suddenly fell silent mid-conversation, he thought something was outside my window. He said for whatever reason, the first thing that came to his mind was aliens, and it froze him in fear. He also told me that shortly after I had returned to my room in the middle of the night, he was disturbed by a loud static noise and felt vibrations in the air. After a few months, this routine, once a month sleepless nights, stopped and never returned. I still don't know what it was all about, or if it was even anything, but that night put both of us on edge. Story 6. Okay, firstly, I'm a lucid dreamer. I can control my dreams and nightmares, but last night I had a dream that was no different than anything else from every night. I was working on the floor of my factory job and running the forklift like normal, until out of the bay door there were fireworks, more like a plume of light, like an explosion, coming from the other side of the valley. I live in the desert. We don't have valleys where I'm at. There are more details if asked, but this is the cut version. We decided to go out after seeing the lights fly away into the sky to the left of us. Once we get outside of the bay door, the ground is illuminated by it like a full moon times 10. We were now in the backyard of my childhood house. We look up to the sky, trying to find the light source, but it was a night sky. When we looked to the right, there was an ugly-looking and typical-looking alien. When it noticed us out, it screeched and jumped up and towards us, but dissolved into the brightening light. I woke up in a scream and couldn't sleep until daylight. My cat, who's pretty aware as well, stared at the wall behind me for a good 30 minutes. Now I can dream about scary stuff, and when it happens I can usually alter it to my advantage. This was different, and I haven't dreamed about aliens in over 10 years. What's this supposed to mean? Does it mean they come back? Story 7. This is my experience I would like to share with everyone about some of the encounters I remember having. It started when I was very young. My parents to this day remember me always screaming in the night for them to come to me. The first encounter I can remember was when I was a kid. I remember getting ready for my first day of school. At the time we were living on post at Fort Sam. I remember waking up at 5 a.m. to get dressed for school and heard this loud, strange humming noise coming from outside my window. When I opened the window, I saw this large silver UFO. I can remember this very vividly to this day. It was so large it covered the whole window. The only thing I could see of it was the silver aluminum from the ship. It had white lights on the top and these light blue lights at the bottom. It freaked me the hell out, and I slammed my blinds shut and screamed for my dad. When he came in, I told him what I saw. He laughed and opened the blinds, and nothing was there. From that day on, I had constant nightmares at night that felt realistic. I could never understand anything they said, but they could understand me. I remember in one dream, I would try and scream for help before they took me with them, and I would be paralyzed and unable to scream for help or get my parents' attention when they took me. They would put me on an examination table and just look at me as if they were studying me. They never did harm to me, but they just observed. I remember being in my early teens, still and having the same dreams. I finally built up the courage to speak with them. I remember the first time I was 12. They took me as usual, but this time I just let them take me. I had a strange, calm feeling this time. When they put me on the table, I asked them what exactly they were trying to do. The one alien told me they were trying to figure out how to make people live forever. They then asked if I felt safe. I told them yes, and asked if they would mind showing me around their ship. I don't remember many details, but the ones I do remember is seeing other people, humans, being examined. One was undergoing surgery. They then took me to a command center, which had a lot of big monitors with strange writings, and underneath the floor was like glass. You could see through it. I was so amazed because I could see Earth and it looked so beautiful. They could read my mind and tell I was pleased, and I told them that they were free to let me come with them as I wanted to learn more about them. For a while I would go back, and instead of being examined, they would take me around the ship, and I met a few different aliens, 3 to be exact. Their faces were slim, they were bright green in color, very skinny and long arms and legs. They wore nothing, and they seemed to really grow on me. We started to have a friendship. I was able to start understanding what they were telling me clearly, but it wasn't speech, it was telepathic communication with me speaking out loud to them. One time they took me into a big green field was like a maze and not on Earth. Not sure where it was exactly, but it was a very peaceful. Nothing was there but hedges and fields of grass. We talked there 2 times, and the third time we talked there, they told me that they would now have to leave me alone for a while, and that I would only see them one last time after this. The last time I would encounter them was very, very strange. They picked me up at the night, laying in bed, and this time I was back on the examination table. I saw one of my friends and I asked him what was going on. He told me not to be scared, but they wanted to test something on me, and if I was okay with it, they would be unable to see me ever again. I was very sad and told them I didn't want to lose them, as we were very close. He told me that this was very important to them, and they could really use my help, that it could change the future of their research. I agreed. I was 14 at the time. Sorry I didn't say that earlier, but this went on for some years before this point. Then another alien, I don't know, had me follow him to this pod. It was egg-shaped silver and had bright red lights around it, and had a chair inside with the glass that would cover it open as I sat in the chair I was scared. There were large, sharp objects hanging from inside, looked like drills and saws. I asked him for my friend, and two of my friends showed up. They held my hand and promised me I would be safe. The other friend behind him reassured me his words, and then the other alien had a long needle in his hand, was about the size of a large medicine syringe, with needed with a at least 2-inch long needle, and there was neon green fluid inside the syringe. I asked if it was going to hurt, and they told me yes, it would, but to remember that I was helping them. I asked them what it was, and they said they wouldn't tell me. So I was ready, and they could tell, and they injected the fluid into my left arm. It hurt a lot. I was crying, and they could tell I was in pain, but shortly after it subsided, I noticed 3 big green fluid-filled blisters on my arm, and then they told me what they had injected into me was the serum that would make you live for eternity. They told me that I should not tell anyone what they did because it was a very secret. My 2 friends gave me a last hug goodbye, and the one that gave me the shot waved goodbye as they sent me back home. When I woke up in bed, I rolled over and I looked at my arm, and I am not lying, there were the 3 green welts on my arm. When I put my finger on it, it popped green fluid on my bed sheets. I popped all 3, and I was kind of scared. I yelled for my dad. He ran in and saw my arm and rushed me to the ER. I didn't want to tell the doctor what happened out of fear of them thinking I was crazy, so I just said that I had no idea what happened. I woke up and had green welts on my arm and popped them. The doctors took samples and prescribed me some chemical burn cream to put on them. I still have 3 circular scars on my left arm, and they are very faint now, but they stayed visible for years. I always wanted to share this, but I have no idea why they were so nice to me and chose me for the experiment. I never saw them after that. Everything stopped. No contact, nothing. Just thought it was strange. I miss them too. I wish them well and would like to think maybe I did something to help mankind in the future, and was glad I could help them. Story 8. Okay, so basically when I was in probably 5th grade, I was staying up watching YouTube on my iPad, and I decided I should probably go to get to sleep. I think it was either 1:30 or 11:30, I can't remember. But I do remember laying in bed and suddenly hearing something. It sounded like the little hovercraft things with blades on them in the movie Incredibles. But yeah, I heard that, and I froze and just sat there not knowing what to do. So I climbed out of bed and looked out the window and saw this little light moving in the sky. Then it stopped for a minute. Then after a bit it kept moving forward, but there was a little light that kept flashing random colors, from red to yellow to green to blue and then back to red again. I know this is going to sound weird, but it was hypnotizing to watch. Not only did it change colors, but it changed shape too. After every flash of color, it would change its shape. Then the next morning, when we woke up, no BS, our satellite was gone. There wasn't any storms the night before or any strong winds at all. It's just gone. Story 9. So let's just get this straight before I tell you the story. My dad is stubborn, no BS type of old guy. He thinks aliens and ghosts, etc. are all a load of crap, and he wouldn't make something like this up. So basically here it goes. We're from England and we live in the Midlands, and one night during the late 80s, my dad and his friend are out making hay in the tractor in a field when all of a sudden a bright flash of light appears right in front of them, and there is a giant ship hovering in front of them. He's always ever told me it looks just like you'd imagine a spaceship, disc-shaped with lights spinning around the edge. Him and his friends had only just taken in what they were seeing before it darted off in the opposite direction towards the next village. So my dad gets on the CB radio, because you know if you didn't have one of those in the 80s, then who even were you? And he radios another farmer friend in that village, and he sees it too. He even radios his wife, who then wakes up his kid, and they see it too before it darts away into the night. I always remember my dad telling me this story when I was a kid, and although out of character for him to do, I just thought it was a cool story he made up. But a couple of years ago, his friend comes over, the one who was in the tractor with him, and just happened to mention it, and his friend remembers instantly and begins to describe it exactly how my dad did, which really makes me believe it was true. My dad still doesn't believe in aliens. He believes it was a spacecraft made by the government to spy on us, and they made it look like a typical alien spaceship so people wouldn't think it was the government. God knows. All I know is I believe it happened, and it's cool as hell. Story 10. When I was about 8, I had what I believed to be an alien encounter. I used to live in the deep country in McKinney, Virginia. The only thing I remember doing was I woke up with my pants and underwear off and walked downstairs because I felt incredibly thirsty. I walked into the doorway of the living room from upstairs and just stood there. My older brother told me to go put some pants on. I ignored him and went into the kitchen. I went to get some water out of my fridge. I look out the window and I see this huge thing with lights rotating. I scream, I drop my cup and yell for my brother, who comes and looks out the window and told me it was just a reflection off the window, but it wasn't because I never saw that again. He tells me he doesn't remember this, but I do. I also had a strange fear of aliens since I was 3, and my parents never spoke to or introduced me to the concept. Another strange encounter I had at the time at the same house was I woke up in the middle of the night. I used to sleep next to my younger brother because I was always scared of being alone as a child, and I turned. I saw an alien and it says, "Greetings, orders." I laid flat and stared at the ceiling and couldn't scream. Only air came out with no sound. Can anyone please debunk this for me? I've looked into sleep paralysis and strange dreams, but ever since these 2 experiences, I haven't had any more. Story 11. While on vacation in Japan last year, I stayed at an Airbnb near the Dago Shrine in Kyoto, Japan. On my last night in town, I come back to my Airbnb about 11:40 p.m. on a Monday night. Mind you, I had no alcohol or drugs in my system when this happened, and I was wide awake. The walkway to the shrine you have to walk through to and from the Airbnb was about 3 city blocks long by 2 blocks going both sides. As the layout goes, there were ditches at the foot of the walls followed by a row of plants alternating all the way down. Then the walkway in the middle, with a museum on the right, a whole shrine, palace at the fork. I walk into the walkway of the shrine and I ask myself this question: why is there 2 kids hopping a wall? As I see these 2 little figures hop the wall to my right, I pause and watch what's happening. As they both get down, they run across the path and run all the way to the end of the path by the fork and wait there. I was walking single file, and they stand there for a few minutes. I walk a little closer, because that was the way to the Airbnb. I make eye contact with these things. They were about 3 or 4 feet tall, very slim but proportionate, but with a bigger head and pointed ears, as white as snow. Their eyes were as big as our eye sockets, but black. Normally you can tell if someone is wearing clothes in a small distance. I was about 15-20 yards from them, but they had no sign of clothes. After making eye contact, both of them go running behind the corner I had to turn. You could also see their shadows on the corner behind them, but I slowed down to give these things space, because I was freaked out a little at this point. And as I turned the corner, they were gone. As I'm walking back to my Airbnb, I sensed I was being followed, but I couldn't hear or see anything. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Hope you enjoyed.